I want to stay with the fallout, the repercussions of that march yesterday. And I'm joined now by Ryvchin, who's the co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. The first thing I wanted to ask you again, Alex, good to talk to you again, but is I know you and your community have been through so much in the past 22 months. Just how unsettling was it to see that march yesterday? The Supreme Leader of Iran, a country and a man committed to the destruction of Israel, is paraded across the Harbour Bridge. Death, death to the IDF is chanted. Terrorist symbols. It must have been incredibly unsettling.
Look, the whole process was concerning for the community. The minute the Supreme Court, the judge of the Supreme Court, announced that she was effectively overturning the decision made by the Premier and by the police to not allow this to go ahead on the Harbour Bridge, there was a great deal of despair and anxiety in the community because we've seen large-scale gatherings before turn violent. We've seen chants in support of terrorism, chants villainising the Jewish community. And this was badged, obviously, as a march for humanity. But when you look at the organisers of this march, the Palestine Action Group, this is not a group that's interested in humanity. Their concept of humanity is the destruction of Zionism in the State of Israel. They're pretty explicit about that. This is a group that, as October 7 was still unfolding, they applied for a permit to rally in support of the Palestinian cause. They called it a great humiliation of Israel. They were reveling in what occurred on that day. So knowing that these were the people that were orchestrating all this, and we're very cleverly branding this as being about humanity to appeal to a mass audience, there was a great deal of concern in the community. And I think that, you know, they succeeded in getting a lot of people there. You know, hearing the police today, they were concerned throughout about what would happen. They were clearly unprepared and they weren't given the chance to prepare. So it's clear to us, and I agree again with what Julie and Lisa said in the previous segment, the Harbour Bridge is a national icon. It's there to unify our city and our country. And what happened yesterday did not do that. It divided us further.
I want to just show you a little bit from Bob Carr at the march yesterday.
Concern for the starvation of the Palestinian people expressed in Sydney on our famous bridge. That'll go right round the world. I'd be immediately recognising Palestine as Canada and the UK and France have done.
Yeah, now that man, of course, is a former Premier of New South Wales, perhaps more alarmingly, a former Foreign Minister of this country. And Alex, it just astounds me we're getting such spin on this march as being peaceful and a march for humanity when they were chanting death to the IDF and supporting terrorist organisations. How can this be acceptable in our modern liberal nation?
Well, look, Bob Carr's a man who's had a particular agenda for a great deal of time. I mean, he's someone who a long time ago was a supporter of Israel and very close to the Jewish community, and then he flipped completely for personal reasons rather than anything else. And, you know, some of the things that he said in recent weeks, you know, likening the situation in Gaza to the Warsaw Ghetto, to Stalin's starvation policy of the Ukrainian peasants, which led to millions of people starving to death and scenes of cannibalism. Bob Carr knows that there's no comparison to be made. He's someone who in the past has said that if there were a single rocket attack on his constituency in New South Wales, he would demand firm and decisive action against it. And when we see the sort of scale of barbarity of October 7, anyone in any concern, any position of leadership that is responsible for looking after their people and rescuing hostages would do everything possible to fight for them and get them back. And that's what Israel's doing. So, you know, you have to take what Bob Carr says with a heavy pinch of salt.
Where do we go in this country, though? We saw what happened at the Opera House 22 months ago. We've seen this now on the Harbour Bridge, and both times authorities either standing back and watching or being neutered by the court. What are you going to demand of state and federal leaders in the future?
Well, look, in this instance, you can't really fault the Premier and his government. They opposed this on very good grounds. I mean, Chris Minns would have been acutely mindful of what transpired on the steps of the Opera House and knowing the possibility of that recurring again at another icon and landmark of our city. He opposed this. The police opposed this. They weren't given the resource and the time to deal with it in an appropriate manner. And in the end, the pressure, the burden that was put on the police was extraordinary. They shouldn't have been put into that position. So you can't fault them. This was the decision of a single judge to overturn what was a very prudent decision made in the interests of the people of New South Wales. But obviously, if the law is being enforced in that way, it'll have to be looked at. And the reason why permits are given is going to have to be reviewed, certainly.
All right, thanks for joining us, Alex. I appreciate your time. Alex Ryvchin there, who's the co-CEO of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry.